No, I haven't.
I highly recommend it. It's not what you think it is. It's a movie perfectly suitable for your interests, our altered states, and it's really a wonderful movie about this professor who's experimenting with ancient herbs and things that come from cultures in Central America, and how it affects his mind, and he's trying to explore consciousness, and it gets off into a little bit of a science fiction thing in terms of, some of the scenery of the movie. But basically the idea is that when you're in an isolation tank, have you ever been in an isolation tank?
I haven't actually, but it is something that I've definitely thought about, and after this conversation, I'm going to look into giving it a go. By the way, just whilst we're talking, I have been typing in Altered States into YouTube, and it's got a William Hurt version with William Hurt.
That's the classic, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's exactly the kind of movie I would recommend for the personality that you are, because and it's not just for you, it's for everybody. But I think it would not be the kind of movie that you would object to having seen.
No, I'm sure not. It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it's mind-opening in very, very significant ways. But anyway, whether or not that movie influenced me in a direct way or not, I came to the understanding myself that in lieu of the fact that I didn't have the means, the wherewithal to actually, rent such a facility as an isolation tank, which again has to be specifically built so that you can have no sound, no light coming in, and it's in darkness, and you lie floating on water that's, I believe, even includes some degree of salinity, and the temperature is just the right temperature, so you don't really feel it, and you're floating, and then after a while, being in this darkness and isolation from any external influences, you get into an extremely deep meditational state, and it can be quite dangerous if you're not prepared for it. So these tanks have to have emergency buttons or something of the sort, because people have freaked out and lost their minds, literally. Right. Whenever one conducts significant meditation, one should be very careful, because you can shock yourself. I mean, your own mind is otherwise free, but that's the only place where we're really free, is in our mind world. And then again, what does that mean then? What is that really freedom then? You see, and how much freedom can we have in the physical life? But that's not the issue. So basically, what I was saying is I developed my own technique, which is if you stand in a dark room try to stand in a dark, silent room in the center of it, where there are no furniture, nothing around you that you could stumble into. Even possibly tie your eyes blind with some, blindfolded with some material, and then stand straight in the middle of that room if you're able to stand, if you're not physically disabled, challenged, and then turn on your own axis with your eyes closed in a dark room without any sounds that would tell you, what direction you might end up facing, and just keep turning until you barely cannot stand it anymore, until you're getting dizzy. Stop and just stand there. And whatever you think about is fine, but you'll start to realize that it can get very, very disconcerting. But what is going on is you're forced to become conscious of your own self-being in the most direct way. And my experience doing this is that that's how you find your soul. You actually do find it. But it's not something that you would then be able to say scientifically to yourself or to others in an abstract way, oh, I now have evidence there's a soul. Are you following me, Danny?
Yeah. It's
something where you actually experience it emotionally, that there's something in you that exists but doesn't have any input by itself, and therefore it is the closest you can get to being dead. If you're in an isolation tank, or if you're able to do what I'm telling you in a room, it's very close to being dead, except that you're not dead in the biological sense. You're mentally at a very minimal level. And it's at that minimus level that we can discover our sense of self. And then we have a sense of direction, because the minute that you stop doing that, once you've done it for enough time, and again, you shouldn't do this for too long, because, well, it gets extremely boring after a while, actually. It really does. I mean, or you start hallucinating and having dreams, which can be very exciting, but it can be dangerous. So you have to limit that. But at some point, when you reestablish the environment around you and you know which direction you were facing finally because you opened the window, whatever. Once you establish, well, now I know where I am, then it really comes to you that this is a method by which you can basically reach an optimal level of self-consciousness following any crisis situation. And I do recommend that if you are a relatively mature person, not a child, and you do this after, let's say, a big fight with somebody or something unpleasant, that this will help you put things in perspective. Because it's like a desert, you see. In ancient times, people living in the deserts, when they had their fights in their tents, in their Bedouin tents, whatever, they would go away from the tents at a distance on their camel or walking into the night or the early evening, and in the beautiful, twilight of the dark blue sky with the twinkling stars and nothing but desert, sand. I'm talking not rocky desert, I'm talking sand. There's such an intense meditational experience. It's quite similar, and that helps put things in perspective, because after all, that's what it is. People have conflict. It's because they're not thinking. They're not in perspective. They're not emotionally connected to their thoughts are not connected to their emotions properly, and their emotions are not connected to their thoughts properly. And ultimately, more important than our thoughts are our emotions.
Okay. Can you just explain a little bit more how that particular meditation is connected to the concept of infinity?
Yes, because when you are in that state of meditation and you also have been exposed to the idea of no beginning, no end to space-time and change through pictures of astronomy that show you just how vast and immense the universe that we can see is, and how small you are even compared to our planet. When you have that sense of dimensions and comparatives, though it's not perfectly possible to feel it, and you do this meditation in contrast, what you're doing is you're contrasting the self-experience of being, of just being, with the idea of the infinite universe being, and not being able to fathom it intellectually. You don't have a sense of it in an abstract way. So basically, that's not a sense, but you don't think of this in an abstract way. What you end up doing is you contrast. Well, here I am, and I'm able to experience this weird experience of not being influenced by sounds and noises and light, and so, minimal existence. And yet there's this infinite universe that is full of chaos and order, mixed chaos and order. Some degree of order, some degree of chaos, and it seems like it's totally pointless, but when you contrast these two things, you do see a connection. You start to see that maybe all that chaos and disorder can have a purpose in your meaning in your life. Maybe your existence, well, it's not maybe, but when you're contemplating this, it starts out as a maybe. Eventually you arrive at an exclamation mark. Oh my goodness. What is all this madness we are doing to one another? Life is so precious. We only, in this specific life each one of us lives, we only live so much time, and we don't know, we can't know for sure what was before and what was after. We may think we do, and some of us may have had supposedly reincarnation, so pre-life experience, right? A sense of having lived before, and it may be true. But you can never prove what you personally are convinced of from your own experience to anybody else.
Right.
And then when you reach that point where you realize you can't prove it to anybody else, you realize that the only way to enlighten people is to recommend that they go through this soul-searching experience of meditating and of thinking of the infinite, and comparing the simple minimalist state of meditation with the concept of the infinite, which is the total chaos and order of the universe. And then when you go through that kind of contrast of self-being and universe being, you start to sense that there has to be more to this existence than just the physical. You have to, otherwise you can't cope. Now people will say, but wait a second, I'm a scientist, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a neurosurgeon, I find no evidence of physically of the soul. And I say to them, I have. Actually, I was on a plane, on a flight from, somewhere, I remember, I was going from Washington, D.C. to